Welcome back to Masculine Mastery, the show where we talk about things that matter to men. I'm your host, Dr. Asif, and with me today, we've got Charles Oliver Burns. Excuse the Oliver, I have to put it in there. It's on your website, so I have to put it in there.
It's fine, it's all right.
Charles, welcome, bro.
Thanks for having me, appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. We last spoke about 3.5 years ago when I was all scarred up from COVID. Actually, still got the scars on my face.
Wow.
And the masks.
Wow.
Well, it was 2020, wasn't it? Like, just as the beginning of the COVID pandemic when I was working on the front line. But since then, I've kind of gone to the back line, still working medicine, but you've kind of gone very much to the front line of when it comes to watches and jewelry, Charles. So tell me about that. It's been really interesting. I've been following you, like I said, for a while now, and got in recontacted over Twitter when I was drooling over some of your watches. So how did everything start with that? Because I know you came on the Apprentice.
Yep.
2017, wasn't it?
In 2017.
Yeah, with Michaela Bushra, quite a few Sergeant, quite a few guys in that cohort, some big characters.
Yeah.
And you kind of slipped on the radar. I remember watching you, and then you kind of made a career for yourself outside of the Apprentice.
Yeah, I say it to people, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but you know, of the 20 or so people that go on the show each year, the candidates that are selected, some are there for, and I'd say more than not, are there for entertainment value and to see where they can springboard from or to. But for me, it was I've always been entrepreneurial from being a kid, right? I was the archetypal selling sweets on a school bus guy, aged 11 when I first started secondary school. Then that then led me into like when Live Strong bands were a thing. Those
yellow ones, the back in the day.
Exactly.
What about the same age, aren't we? This is like mid 2000s, like 2005 or like.
Probably because I was born in '93, so plus 11 years, 2004, 5, something like that. Yeah. And then there was the Nike racism band, and then it became like Power Balance, which was this kind of like. So what happened was I just had funds from selling sweets, and it just snowballed. I was making like £100 a week profit that time, going to Costco, buying strawberry pencils and rainbow sticks and all these things, and Oreos also. And but it's funny because I kind of cut my teeth there, because then all some other kids were like, oh, this guy is doing something cool. So then you have competition, and then they're offering different things, different prices, and how can you compete? So all this time I'm always like being entrepreneurial, and friends and family are like, oh, you should go on the Apprentice or Dragon's Den, and you're like, like whatever. Then it came to 2017. And I just finished a piece of work with the family business. Basically, it was at the brink of collapse. We saved it, thankfully, and that was good. And then I was like, what do I do with myself? And literally looked on Facebook randomly, and it said last day to apply, and the rest is the rest. Got on the show. But I had no interest in being a business part of Blood Sugar. And I'm not just saying that. People that know me know that was true. I just thought this is something interesting, fun to do, and that's what happened. Went on the show, and I've always had a very strong interest back to the watch front in wristwatches. In fact, I'll show you here. So this is one of the first. It's one of the first like Swiss watches that I ever got. So if someone's not watching this and they're listening, it's basically like a Gucci black. I think it's probably PVD or something.
Yeah.
And so that was like one of the first that I bought. And I've just my family have been in watch and jewelry. My grandfather was a watchmaker in the 1950s, and then we've had all sorts of stuff from Cartier agencies, Omega, Breitling, all the big names really.
Patek as well. You got some Pateks, right?
Right. So now, whether this is now is very different, but like in terms of we used to be licensed, like what they would call authorized stockists or authorized dealers now of Cartier, Breitling, Omega, Tissot, Longines, all these brands. We've now got a very different business. But I've always had this interest in watches. And to be perfectly frank, I hadn't done trading like I'm doing at the moment with one marketplace. up until really 2017, after The Apprentice had actually aired. Because I'd finished this project with a family business, which is pretty much just saving it from collapse. And I didn't really know where my life was going from there, because that was a baptism of fire, just 2 years of just do what you can to make sure this business is saved. Because the biggest problem was, not only was it the livelihood of my father and my grandfather, they also had what people in the commercial world will understand is what's called a PG, or a personal guarantee, which means that your house or both their houses were liable should the business fail, which is a huge problem.
Next on the line, essentially, isn't it?
Everything's on the line. So I was working at Tesco at the time. I was in a buying capacity. It's a whole different story. Really cool job. And it was like, I have to come back and save this no matter what. And I was 21 too, like, you know, it just was what it was. I won awards for saving the business. So in Watch Pro, which is like the preeminent title for watch professionals in the UK, I won an award there as the retail titan in 2015. So then The Apprentice happened. Then, you know, there's the filming of it, of course, and then there's a lag until it gets aired. During that lag, it's kind of confusing. You're like, what do I do? I'm a bit lost in things. And then the watch thing creeped back in, and I thought, okay, we'll start on the watch front again. The problem was, of course, I had only one phone number at the time. It was my personal number. So I would put that phone number on an advert for a Cartier, for argument's sake. And by the way, at this point, this is 2017, and no matter what anyone will tell you, very few people were using social media to sell watches. Now you see it everywhere. Back then, it wasn't even a thing. Like, you just see it. So all of a sudden, all these young kids thought it was really cool to call a guy from The Apprentice directly and, you know, talk nonsense. So most of my day was dealing with that kind of thing. I mean, I remember waking up at 4 a.m, not finishing till midnight. My wife at the time was going crazy, and never see you, this, and it wasn't working. Truly, it was not working. And whether it was because, again, it was all these hoax calls I was getting, whether it was my energy was in the wrong place, I don't know, or also now there's more dealers than there were, so that's kind of spread out more. Whereas when there were fewer dealers, you just got everything, but now you get kind of and then this is being just, you know, I'm very truthful, and people will know this who see my burning issues or see everything that I do. I had then a really difficult battle from 2018, I'd say early 2018 to basically the end of last year, so 22. So a good 4 years of just mental health, like really difficult situations. And truthfully, would those things have happened without The Apprentice another day? I don't necessarily think so. I talk about it like this because a lot of people say, oh, like mental health, there's two things going on, right? There's people who just go through emotional changes, and if you've not looked at it, it's definitely worth Googling the emotional cycle of change. It's a super useful kind of graph that shows you how things change over time emotionally, and it can be intra-hour, intra-day, intra-year, right, depending on what it is. People forget we're human beings. We're supposed to experience ups and downs. That's how it is. And so that's not mental health. But people think that is mental health. Oh, I have a bad day at work and I've not this and that and the other, and I feel really depressed. That's not depression.
That's just normal fluctuations, isn't
normal.
it?
Totally normal. Oh, I feel anxious going outside because that's not like that happens once. Like, that's not a thing. So that's the first thing. People are almost too, you know, it's good that it's not a taboo anymore, but it's actually almost gone totally the other way now, where like people are just using that as like they're labeling something of which is normal human, you know, behavior into something that like is an extreme, which it isn't. So and then there's the other category of people who completely don't understand what you're talking about when you say the word mental health, and they kind of shut down. And I explain it like this. I'm like, okay, so if I said to you, how's your back today? And let's say you're a healthy person, you're like, yeah, it's all good. and then I go grab a sledgehammer and I smash you in the back, the change to that question, the answer to that question will be rather different, and you're going to require probably some medical attention, I would suggest. I'm quite strong, so I think you need some medical attention. I'm hoping. So that is exactly what happens with mental health, right? You're going about your day, you're going about your year, and things are good. All of a sudden, a couple things happen. The pressure gets turned up. Maybe you lose your job. Maybe your wife's or your partner is not having a good relationship with you, vice versa. Maybe your family relationships aren't great, and this is not going great, and financially not in a great spot. And all of a sudden, these things all converge, and the heat's turned up, and all of a sudden, things start to like explode and pop, right, like a volcano might. And that's how I kind of explain what happened with me in 2017 through 18. So you have this huge explosion of fame, is the easiest way of describing it. Or at least recognizability. That's probably a better word to use. So all of a sudden, listen, I'm known in Manchester because I've lived here all my life, and you know what I do for a living and my personality, but not to the extent where I would go anywhere. People would want photographs. They want to ask you this and that and the other, and it's kind of strange when you're not. It's like being a childhood star in Hollywood, I can imagine, where you go from obscurity to like everyone wanting a piece of you, and it's kind of strange. That happened. The marriage was already kind of not right, to be honest with you. So that was going, you know, into a divorce effectively. And if I'm honest with you, a few of the bits and pieces, a guy put £250,000 into a business of mine. Not to again another time, but he put some money into that business. Turned out I knew it wasn't right, so I kind of gave him his money back. But a year later, I found out he did £250 million of fraud, 250 million. And it's all over the FT, if you were to, and all the kind of publications. So all these things going on all at the same time. And I think if I'm actually looking at it, is that I press the self-destruct button. The self-destruct button is a lot closer to people than they actually think it is. And one of my mentors at Tesco said to me when I got the news of this £250,000, she said, the thing now is you've got two devils. You've got time and you've got money. And when you got those things, it's very, very dangerous. People don't understand that. They think, oh, now, you know, and I had the fame, right? So fame, some money, and all of a sudden time on your hands. Like, that's not a very good place to be.
Especially when you've not been trained for it. It just comes, it just dawns on you overnight, essentially overnight, isn't it? The Apprentice, when the candidates get released.
Absolutely. I remember what happened in my series. So you have to make like a cover story, right, as to why you're away for a period of time when you're filming. And mine was like, I think I said I was doing some consultancy or something in the States. And when you're filming, you don't have access to phones and this, that, and the other. I can't remember how I found this out. Maybe my ex-wife, you speak to your partner once a week for like 10 minutes supervised, which is another conversation. But I think it was her or someone said to me that, oh, on Twitter, like there's been a photo release when we were filming. We were filming in not Shoreditch. There's it's where all the pop-up stores. It could actually be Shoreditch.
Oh, Camden.
No. You know the in London where you've got all the Box Park. Exactly where it was. It was Box Park. Yeah. And it's pretty obvious. You got Claude and Karen stood around. So someone snapped a picture. I don't know how my buddy found this picture. I've no idea. So the cat was out the back for friends and family. Made things a lot easier, to be truthful. Then, of course, when it's on air, I recall the Wednesday night, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, or is it Thursday night, whatever night it's on, and sit down to watch it. Now, I always say to people, you are one half of a team. So there's Team A split into two and Team B split into two. So there's effectively 4 different stories going on per episode, right? 4 different things. And you're only seeing one. So I'm seeing 25% of the 75% of activity generally. And even with that 25%, I don't know how they're going to skew it and this, that, and the other. So really, I'm watching a completely warped reality of that I've kind of been involved in, but at the same time I haven't. So it's kind of new to me too. But I remember watching it with friends and family, my phone was blowing up because in that first episode, I was kind of painted as the villain, right? Which again, you don't know this, right?
Yes, it's all narrative, isn't it?
You don't know the narrative.
Editorial discretion.
Absolutely, you know the narrative. The narrative was that I was the villain at the time. So I'm looking at my phone, and Twitter goes and says, "You're trending. Do you want to? We recommend you filter out, the interactions." No, I don't need that, dude. What a mistake! Oh my word! I wasn't watching any of the show. I was just seeing fat bastard and square eyes but like relentless, dude. Like her conveyor belt relentless. I remember that night going to bed or in bed, and my brain is just, I can't even, it's not like just overdrive, like just energy, like things like just whirring around. Yeah. And then there was nothing for a couple of days, right? There was no like, all right, there might have been an interview there, but nothing really. I went out the Saturday night following into the centre of Manchester. And again, I didn't think anything was going to happen. I don't know why, but I just didn't think of anything was going to happen. And if you get 6 million, 7 million people watch this show, it's a lot of people. And then I say to people, if you go to, say, a restaurant, say it's 1 in 10 people watch the show it as a whole. But in a restaurant, you take out then people that will be under the age that would be there and people that will be over the age, and you see the median. It might be 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people in that restaurant watch that show. Well, that's a lot of people. If you think about, there's like, I don't know, 40 tables of people, and do the maths, 8, 9 tables might. And the weird thing is, they think they know you from somewhere. Yes. You're not like David Beckham, right? Where they know instantly, oh, that's who it is. But they're looking all the time over. And you're like, at first, I didn't really know. I was just like, oh, there's nothing. Then eventually someone comes over and it kind of starts and they go like, do I know you from school? And you're like, don't think so. And eventually after 5 minutes, it's like, you volunteer normally, like, oh, actually, I think you know me from The Apprentice. Oh my God. And then they ask the same questions and then they take a photograph. And I was with my ex-wife. I think, we were married, as with 2 friends, and they were loving it. And I'm just like, interesting. And then it kept happening then, because once someone's taking a photograph, everyone wants to know why someone's taking a photograph. So they keep coming and blah, blah, blah. And then we're walking around the streets of Manchester after that, and people are just walking up to me and asking, it's bizarre. And that was
after the first week, was it?
That was first week.
Bloody hell.
First week. And then I would say I was on the show for equivalent of 8 weeks or 2 months of the show of screen time. And then, so that would have taken us, I think, November, December. And I don't think it properly wore off for 6 months after. I think it was 6 months after. It was still crazy. My craziest story, which is now has a different meaning than it did then, and you'll hit no one in a second, is, and I still have the photo on my phone of this. So I saw it the other day. There's a nightclub in Manchester called Albert Schloss, or a bar, whatever you want to call it. And this girl comes out of the bar. And she looks at me and she goes, oh my God. And she's swearing, like, you're Charleston The Apprentice. I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, I was just like in Albert Schloss and, Ryan Giggs was there. This is before all of the things came out, right? So like, for me, I'm a huge United fan. I'm just like, it's Ryan Giggs. Like, that's all it is. And she's like, oh, he was so horrible. He wouldn't let me take a photograph. So she actually texts her father. She takes a photograph of me with her, or someone does, I forget. And she texting her father saying, like, F Ryan Giggs, because she's just been complaining to him about how he wasn't giving her like a photograph. Yeah. F Ryan Giggs, I just met Charles from The Apprentice. And
that's an upgrade, man.
It was amazing, man. And I can find it because the other day, on the old iPhone these days, you can type in, here you go. This is the proof. Here you go. You can actually see what happened there.
You don't look any different. Seriously, that was 6 years ago. Gosh,
that was some time ago. So back to the point about like the mental health stuff. So there was like that happened, and for no reason, my childhood friends lived in London, right? And so they kind of went around. My best brother moved over to the States when I was 13, so he wasn't about. So I was kind of isolated, and all of a sudden, it's like, you're just kind of like, I was, if I look at it now, if you took away The Apprentice, I was just kind of like lost at that point. You know, like I was getting divorced. I wasn't living at home. I was living in centre Manchester. And I'm not a big drinker, and I wasn't drinking, and I don't really do drugs, or not really. I don't do drugs, right? So none of those things happening. People thought that was what was happening. I was just high on life, and that's kind of my character. And people didn't really get it at the point. You know, like people look at my Instagram stories, which I love doing, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, you posted 20 Instagram stories today. There must be something wrong." It's like, no, like that's just me. Like I like to express myself by doing that. I'm not doing it to show off. I just like sometimes look at the end of my day and go, "Oh, that was a fun day. Look at all those things that happened in things." And obviously from a work perspective, what I do selling luxury watches, like people want to see, I think anyway, that I'm a real human being. I'm not just, here's a watch for $5,000, here's a watch for $10,000. Like, to me, that's just boring. There's no personality. There's no like buying into me and buying into what I am as a brand, not just what the business stands for.
100%. Yeah, because you're not selling a watch, you're selling a lifestyle.
You're not selling a watch. Listen, with the products that I'm selling are homogenous. You can get them in a multitude of situations. And I was trying to, one of the guys I work with today or the other day, and he had this whole issue with Apple and his laptop, and he said, "Wow, the way they helped me out and did this." That's what matters. Like service has always been the thread of importance to me, and number one importance. We never talk about being the best price and this. We try and price correctly where the market is, but someone's always willing to do cheaper. Someone's always willing to do something else. What someone won't do, and I pride myself on this, is go to the lengths that we will to make that client happy, to make their partner, whoever they're buying for, the best possible experience imaginable. And that's what we do, and that's why we get repeat clients. That's why we have good reviews on Trustpilot, Google, and all those things. But going slightly back to the mental health thing just for a second. So it then, I mean, again, bearing in mind, before all this, if you'd have asked me about mental health, I would probably have been in that camp I mentioned before of being like, "What are you on about?" Like, you know, like I just get on with things. I'm a confident guy. Like I've always been this way. I always, again, you know, that's the way I've been. And then I'd say all this pressure kind of came to be, and The Apprentice is a once in a lifetime thing. Nothing and no one could ever prepare you for. And so all that kind of culminated, and it led to effectively from 2018, I forget the date, I think late 18 to pretty much similar time, 22, in and out of hospital, mental health hospital. This is 3 occasions. 2 were of my own volition, so I didn't know at the first time that's what I was trying to do, but I knew something wasn't good, wasn't right. The middle time is a whole different conversation, which wasn't, in my opinion, right, but at least the first and last times were. But the things you see in those institutions and the things you learn because you're in with all these walks of life. I actually recall, quite funnily enough, that the psychiatrist that you would see once a week for like 15-20 minutes when I was like in hospital first time, because when people present with bipolar, which is what they thought I have and whatever, I'm not convinced that's necessarily a true diagnosis, but whatever. Interestingly enough, they do call bipolar the CEO's disease.
It's common, and absolutely, because it's before bipolar, it used to be called manic depressive. Essentially, that was the in lithium is a mood stabilizer we give for bipolar disorder. But yeah, absolutely, a lot of CEOs, lots of CEOs. When like even Abraham Lincoln, they said he could be bipolar. You know, a lot of leaders from the past, because they go into deep moments of solitude, and then very expressive. Hitler, for instance, so anyone who was a very charismatic leader, good or bad, they said a lot of them had bipolar disorder because they had this euphoric moments, and at the same time, for many weeks and many months, they would withdraw.
Interesting. It's very interesting. Unfortunately, what I think, and I can only talk from experience, that we do in this country, from my experience, is we try and put people from the mental health side of points into some form of disorder or box that allows us to medicate and then stabilize, whatever that means, rather than actually, in my opinion, talking like we are now and like actually trying to understand, okay, who is Charles as a person? Who is Dr. Asad as a person? What's led Charles to be a quote unquote normal adult to this point, to where we are now? Because I think if you actually had the conversation with me, you'd gone, hold on, before we medicate, before we do X, Y, and Z, these things that have happened to him, take the Apprentice out of this and just say divorce, bankruptcy. That was another thing I forgot to mention, which was, again, a self-destruct button. All these things. That's enough for anybody who feels certain ways. And those are things that should be talked about openly and should be converse with friends or professionals or whatever. And that's something that isn't done in these places. There's not enough time, quote unquote, as they say. They're too busy doing other things. And you end up just being put in this melting pot of people from all different backgrounds, which is interesting for sure. And then the other challenge is you don't actually know where along the spectrum of mentally well to mentally really unwell people are that you're talking to. So that kind of warped things for a while. And then you've also got a whole plethora of different people with different conditions, which makes things rather interesting. It's a very unusual place to be, because I said this the other day, I was thinking about this. There aren't many times in your life as an adult, right? Maybe this is probably like as a child, it is the case, where in fact it's not open as a child, because as a child you've got school and homework and things. In this particular environment, when you are in a mental hospital and you are sectioned, which is like basically means you're legally held there.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be held there.
Yeah. And you don't have to think about what time you're waking up. You don't think about meal preparation, because that's done for you, breakfast, dinner. You don't have anything to do. You can't even really watch TV because there's one TV between X number of people. That's out. And so all of a sudden, again, it's kind of, I'm not saying it's good or bad, there's both sides. You have a lot of time to think and consider things, and it's a very, very interesting place to be and to find yourself. And around all these different people from walks of lives. I mean, some were like super dangerous criminals in their time, and they're just put in this pot. They don't really know. You don't understand the time. They just don't know what to do with it. They just don't really know like what to do with the people there. So you've got the mix of people and things that I saw. I mean, some are like, thankfully, I don't know how I'm good at dealing with things, but some extremely traumatic things you would see, the worst things you can imagine, and that more. And on the other side of it, you would see people, and that's what I started doing a bit when I was kind of better, quote unquote, is kind of mentoring people and helping them through their own difficulties. I think you probably heard of the term the wounded healer.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, my friend Dr. Ahmed, who was going to invite on the podcast, he's a friend of mine. He's a Lebanese psychiatrist, Dr. Ahmed Hanker. Shout out to him. He's actually got the wounded healer tag on Instagram. So on Twitter, that's his actual handle. And I believe he's writing a book. He's a Cambridge doctor. He's writing a book. I was in contact with him recently, last couple of years actually. But wounded healer, exactly. Basically lived experience.
I mean, I funnily enough, the person that introduced that to me was another candidate on The Apprentice in my year, which is Jade English, who I've not spoken to in a long time, but I was quite friendly with her at the time. And she mentioned this to me. I don't know how it came to pass, but effectively, my understanding of it is you have your own things going on that you haven't resolved, but you find solace in helping other people, and in fact, often are very good at helping other people through theirs. So whilst I was dealing with trying to figure out what on earth was going on with myself, you would see people, and like one example was a guy super like old who remember my grandfather was in his 80s, and no exaggeration, and I think it was actually I get him slightly confused as to which time in hospital this was. I think this was the final time, and he was at a point when I first came across this guy where you would think that he should be in an old age home. Like he can't eat him for himself. He can't speak. He's literally would be. I remember seeing him in his room because it was across from where I was, sat on his sat at the end of his bed, because one of the people there, the nurses had said, "Oh, we're going to shower you or something." And then I remember looking like 2 hours later, the guy's still there because no one's coming actually. You know what I mean? That was the level this person was at, right? Complete, vegetable would be probably the non-political way of saying it. But like, there was nothing. There was like, and if you were to look at that person, you would think that's it. Like, that's just, they're not going to get better. They're going to deteriorate from there. You think maybe they've got dementia, Parkinson's, who knows? That was what you think. And so I just was looking at how they were treating this fellow, and back to that not having this talking therapy piece, which I think might just be a theme in what we're doing here, ironically enough. I was like, I wonder if I just sit with this guy and just see what happens. And no word of a lie, over maybe 4 or 5 weeks, you wouldn't believe the difference in this guy. It got to a point where he was so cheeky to the women's staff, they had to be like removed type thing. And like, you're like, how can this, how
from here to there?
It's impossible. It's not possible that someone can. And the same happened with this really young, I think she was 18, 19-year-old, who was like a mouse, a real field mouse, wouldn't say anything, and was kind of had this like ghostly look and was constantly frightened all the time, and walking the corridors and kind of like, just lost is the truth. Completely lost. So I did the same thing. I was like, all right, let's just sit with this person like at lunch and just not even say anything, and day by day and week by week, and they all of a sudden, like, this person's like a different human being, and you start to go, hold on a minute, like, that's just 2 examples. There are plenty more. And I'm not just saying it was me, right? There were other things going on, but like, I was a significant proponent of what went on, and you could ask me with that. And it's not like I did anything special, right? All I was doing was just trying to figure out like, what's going on here. And it turned out the young lady, she was actually studying to be a mental health nurse, believe it or not. And then got caught up in the system. And I just wish the system would appreciate the fact that there needs to be more talking therapy whilst you're in there. And then when you are released from there, I don't know why they haven't figured this out. The things that you have seen from a traumatic point of view needs to be dealt with. And also coming from a place where often people are there for months, if not years, in these positions, sometimes right? And you have no independence in there, to a position of now, okay, we think you're well, bye-bye. I know
exactly. There's no kind of real follow. You go from there to there. And that's something which I've grappled with as well as a doctor on the other side of that. I'm like, where's the intermediate step? You're getting people often institutionalizing them with medication and nursing care, etc., psychiatric assessments in a psychiatric hospital or psychiatric unit. And then they're being discharged, section being removed, being discharged, so to speak, into a society with community psychiatry follow-up. We call that liaison psychiatry. We got the follow-up there. But they now need to readjust into life, because they've just been in an institution where you get 3 meals a day. Often you get injections, haloperidol, all these kind of things, tranquilizers, and then you're going into a society. A lot of people, it's hard to cope. Really, it really is hard to cope with that, because you spend a significant portion of your life, maybe sometimes 2 years, 18 months. A lot of guys are in there for. And then you're going to go out in 2 years. Lots of change. In 2 years, I remember watching a video of a guy who was in prison for a few years, but he went in during late 90s, early 2000s, where internet just bloomed, and he came out of prison and he didn't know how to open a taxi door. Like, he just, because things are just so advanced within the few years that he was in there. It's the same if you're a psychiatric inpatient. There's no step down care. We have it in medicine, but not in psychiatry, and that is really the shame here.
I mean, it's interesting. I have a podcast called the Burning Desire Show, and then Burning Issues is the weekly vlog where I talk about things like we're talking about now for five minutes or so. And using the term burning desire, something that I want to do when I have the funds and means to do so, is to actually show a blueprint of what good looks like. And it's a very Tesco corporate term that
what good looks like. Yeah, no,
oh,
it's
yeah. they love that over there. I don't know if they've changed it or not, but wow, yeah, I was on a board for them, so I was like really au fait with those things. Anyway, yeah, what good looks like for mental health hospitals, basically, or mental health institutions, or whatever you want to call them. Hospitals, I guess, is the term, because for me, you wouldn't believe the lack of just talking that exists. And as I say, talking with your peers that are there, let's use that term, it's all well and good. But as I go back to, you don't know where that person is on their journey of getting back to whatever normal is for them or healthy is for them. So that actually can be very damaging to a lot of people that don't have the emotional intelligence to be able to figure that out. And it can be a very traumatic experience, and I can appreciate how a lot of people may never recover from that. And then they come out and then they're put into the welfare state and they're not seen for 3 years after that. Like, how are we expecting these people to be able to have ambition, to stand on their own 2 feet and everything else? I mean, one of the biggest thing that helped me was I was extremely fortunate to find this fellow and do this charity in Manchester, which is called Mood Swings. Fantastic charity that people need to know more about. And this fellow who worked for that charity, called Tom, he was my age, or he's my age to say, and it just was coincidental that he went through a very similar, what they call a manic episode, is how they kind of describe it, which was like perpetuated from a kind of business idea, which is kind of how mine was, to be fair, which is a little bit of a longer story for another day. But so we had very, very similar experiences and were of a similar age. And he would every single week, most weeks when I was in hospital, but also more important when I was outside of hospital, he would come and visit me in Prestwich, where I'm from, and we would go for a coffee. And some weeks, and a lot of weeks, there would be no eye contact from me. There'll be no conversation. There'll be nothing. And he's not taking notes. He's not like, he's very well trained, don't get me wrong, but like, it's just like this is. And I actually, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just trying to tell people they should be doing these things. I've just literally come from an hour ago. I mentor someone for a charity as well now, because I've been looking for opportunities for a while, and something came up, and it turns out the fellow is nearer 60, and he is a community leader, I'll put it at that. And you wouldn't expect this sort of person to be who they are. And I remember he told me afterwards, when they paired me with him and they said, oh, this guy's 30 years old, he was like, what on earth can this do?
30 and 60, like half their age.
Very, very much so, yeah. And it's been a real privilege, because I know how much just that hour a week, and it's same as this. It's just an hour a week, and he's talking about how his week was and what's going on. And if I can kind of guide and advise, I will, but not too much. And he wouldn't realize how much that means. I mean, I had a different note. A friend of mine, very, very good friend of mine, he called me yesterday out the blue, which is, he's just not the sort of person that calls you. So I'm like, all right. So he calls me up and he's like, dude, I haven't told you like how proud I am of you, like of what you've done this year. And I'm like, where, dude, where is this coming? What are you saying? Where is this coming from? Because basically, and I've talked about this before, end of December last year, early January, in between that period, my family were on holiday, and I'm very fortunate that that happens. But I was in a terrible place, right? I say terrible. I'd come from a terrible place, and this is what people have to understand about life, right? And being in different places. Like, you would not, you know of me, you see what I do. Like, I'm pretty out there in terms of how I go about my day. before.
You're very open, like we like timestamps. Charles is having lunch and a cigar for breakfast.
Oh yeah.
Charles is having dinner at this Thai place.
Absolutely. I've done that timestamping for so long. Yeah. I just love it. I think it kind of I like that kind of snapshot of the moment.
Yeah. You know what? Honestly, I swear to God, I don't watch anyone's stories but yours. I swear. I don't watch anyone's stories, but I just find yours just so real. I just find
it's just like actually I'm gonna take a shot of this, and then that'll be like, you'll be on the story.
That's a privilege, bro.
There we go. Well, let's get you there. There we go. Beautiful.
I just love stuff. I'm like, this guy, he's just telling exactly. He's not filtering it or
no. This is it.
You're just telling it literally.
I've never filled a photo and never will, because it is what it is. And honestly, some of the monotony of life is to be really appreciated and enjoyed. I was watching a bit of The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, the guy from WWE, and now obviously a huge movie star, being interviewed by Joe Rogan, and they were talking about that. Like, people don't understand. Like, again, Joe Rogan talks about this, and I find it funny too. Like, the word like enjoy the journey is so overused by everyone, but like it's pivotal. Like listen, this business I started this year, and like back to my friend being proud, like I am just proud of the fact, going back a little bit to December, January of last year, I had come out of hospital on the 13th of May 2022, and I, for 6 months, give or take, I would wake up at 1 p.m. each day. I'd go to bed at 10 p.m. So it's not like I was going to bed late. That was what was happening. I would barely be able to get out of bed. I wouldn't say anything, and I mean nothing, like zero, for all that period of time. There was nothing. I was, to be honest with you, I never thought of this, but I was pretty much like that older guy I mentioned to you. Like, I was a vegetable, dude. There was no other way.
It's like you're in a coma, almost comatose.
Totally. I may as well have been in a bed on an IV drip. That's as much activity I was doing. We
call that in medicine. I don't know if you come across the word stupor.
No.
Yeah, so the psychiatric word is stupor or catatonia.
Catatonia, I've heard about that.
Yeah. So it's essentially being flat. I hate to use the word flat as a pancake. No, that's what you are. You're flat in mood. Wow. And you're flat. I think you're literally flat. You're lying in bed for like 18 hours. So
yeah,
and that is, again, the absolute motivation drains from you.
Yes.
And your body goes into survival mode. Your mind goes into survival mode, and your mind says, I need to conserve energy. So that's the human instinct. Your brain is there to keep you alive. Wow. And that's the primitive brain, isn't it? So it's very, very common. And you get something called seasonal affective disorder, SAD.
Yes.
I had it at med school, particularly this time. I Googled today, when is children in need? Because that's my peak of my seasonal affective disorder, SAD. I'm trying to show you my tablets. They're over there. But I take vitamin D tablets. Just
you still have it. You still have it. This
absolutely. I was looking today for some flights to Cyprus or somewhere. I just want some winter sun. Like me, you've got like darker skin, like olive skin, and we affect.
I definitely don't. It's just a light.
It's a light, right? You've got dark hair. So people with darker complexion or darker, hair color, we have more melanin. More melanin then essentially acts as a stronger filter for vitamin D absorption from the sunlight.
Okay.
So we have, Asian, darker skin, even Europeans who are darker skin, and obviously Afro-Caribbean have much less vitamin D, and then that causes something called SAD, seasonal effect. Actually, I tweeted it today. I wrote about it a few years ago. But yeah, SAD, and that's not recognized by a lot of people. They call it winter blues. But why is it winter blues? Is because I know vitamin D is lacking. That's
right. And light, aren't you, that kind of help as well? And
yeah, exactly. November is men's mental health month.
Yes,
and it's very, very rarely talking about.
Well, why was I just leading with that? So just to finish off that point about just for about 6 months being catatonic, is that the word you use?
Yeah.
So catatonic in a way where people that know me and have known me for a long stretch of time wouldn't believe that's even possible.
Yeah.
In fact, even for me to reflect back upon that, because one of the irregularities with me, and my, let's call him my therapist, this guy called Tom I mentioned. He calls me an enigma because it isn't usual for people like to happen what happened, and then to what happened this year and how my life has been. But like it's just, even for me, the thing that's a regularity is I'm pretty much able to put myself back in all those positions, and like mentally I can get myself, remind myself of, I would say 80% of all of those difficult times. 20% was over medicated to a point where you're just a zombie, right? So there's I can remember things, but like it's sporadic. But like most of the time in hospital, for example, I was pretty compass mentis. I know what went on. I know who was there and what was going on. Similarly with this catatonic state, which is quite rare. Most people kind of just like, your brain just doesn't remember it because it wants to. But for me, I kind of can. So I'm coming off the back of that. I remember I thought things were never going to change, right? Because I had attributed ambition and entrepreneurial success with my quote unquote bipolar condition, which meant that I could not achieve any form of success financially or otherwise in the entrepreneurial sense, because when I did and I got close to that fire, so to speak, I got burnt so badly I'm back in hospital. And that's kind of what happened on the 3 different occasions, right? Things started to go well, I started to go unwell, right? That was kind of the pattern. So my brain then, if I'm looking back at it in hindsight, and funny enough, Lord Sugar's thing was like, oh, if you could be more Mr. Foresight and less Mr. Hindsight, you're very successful. Kind of interesting that he pointed that out, right, on that your fire jet. So if I go back to the hindsight of that, it's really, I remember one moment specifically in that period of time. It must have been 10 p.m. I come down, I'm living at my parents' house at this point. I come down to my parents, they're both watching TV. I've gone to bed, remember, they come on. And I literally just said, and I don't know, I hadn't been thinking like this, if that makes sense. I don't know where it came from. And my words were just simple this. I just said to them, and I bear in mind I don't really speak at this point. I'm kind of like the guy from Penn and Teller that doesn't speak. That's kind of
like Teller, the quiet guy.
That's it. And I'm like, I just say, I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore, right? And like, I don't even know how I mentally got to that place, but I did, right? And the fact of the matter, I did. Now I hadn't like come up with how I was going to do this. I know that I was just basically saying that I am not able to do the things that I want to do. So what's the point? That was basically what that was, right? And my parents are great. They tried everything and every psychiatrist, and it was all wasted on me, because it has to come from you at a certain point in time. It's like being, I'm not going to compare it to, but I have people that I know that being through, Alcoholics Anonymous and Gambling Anonymous, and it's great. It's all well and good, your friend and family trying to help you, but until you at some point, and it's all different for every different people. And for me, we go on this holiday, and I can't remember exactly if I was a little bit better. I think I must have been a bit better at that point, just from time. And I'm sat with my father, and I said to him, look, I'm seeing all these people on Instagram and whatever else as watch dealers. Like, it's driving me mad. Like, I can do this. Like, I'm gonna become a watch dealer, like, full time. I'm gonna move out of into my own place where I'm sat right now. And
nice place.
Thank you.
I like the little French doors with the.
Yeah, man.
It looks like
it's
a conservatory.
It's a really beautiful wraparound balcony that gets a lot of.
I'll have to come for some latte then. I'll have to come for some pumpkin spice latte.
You're always welcome, man. And so I remember saying to him, there's 2 things. It was like, I am going to become a full-time watch dealer, and I am going to move out. And my 30th birthday was April 14th. So I was like, well, that's when I'm going to do it by. And the February of that year, so less than 8-9 weeks later, I pretty much started watch dealing professionally, and then I'd got into my own place. And then back to this buddy of mine calling me and say that how proud he is. Like, it's incredible, because I've albeit yes, my family have a history in watching and stuff and whatever. Pretty much everyone that is a client of mine at this point are new people. I've developed a business from scratch. Albeit I've had don't get me wrong, like a very, very good, backing from family business, which doesn't hurt. But I could still, if I was honest with you, have done nothing this whole year. I could have just sat around and, but actually no, I've gone on and kicked on and thankfully I found a way. And I was talking to the guy that I mentored before about this. I had this in my mind back to when this catatonic state, I had this then impression that you couldn't possibly be, in other words, mutually exclusive was the fact that you're either content with where you're at or you're ambitious. It's not possible for the two things to coexist. And obviously now I realize it's totally wrong. In actual fact, you have to be content with where you are in order to allow yourself to be ambitious and to go and do what you need to do. Because back to what we just said, and back with The Rock was talking about this, and I talk about this, that you have to enjoy the day to day. And like, that's why when I look at my Instagram, like the little cigar that I have or the meal that I have, like I'm savoring that. Like I am savoring every little thing. This conversation, right? This is what I live for, man. This is what I love to do. And same with what I do day to day. One of my buddies the other day said to me is, just for context, a incredibly wealthy guy, has all the trappings, all the toys and everything. And he says to me, he's like, but I don't get it. Like, you don't drink, you don't do drugs, like you don't really have any vice. He's like, I'll smoke cigars, but that's a choice, right? I don't have to smoke a cigar. It is not.
Cigar and a coffee is a good combo, man.
it's a great combo, dude. As long as it's the right coffee and the right cigar.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. No, it's good.
Both South American, Cuban cigar and a South American, Colombian or Bolivian blend of coffee.
You can count me in. You can count me in. So he was kind of confused by it. And I said, and it's so cliched, but like people will know this if they see me, they know me. Like watches is what I live for. Like I can't explain to you the obsession is the only way to describe it that I have with watches. And it's nothing to do with status symbols. It's obviously nothing to do with telling the time. Anyone knows that, who's into watches knows that's not the point. I've always been interested in, again, I used to earn money at school and I would always like to buy a nice pair of trainers. And back then, like, remember D squared was like, before it was like it is now. It was like a £300 pair of trainers, and the £300 back then is probably what 800-900 is now. And I'm like 13, 14, and I can buy these things myself. And I remember buying those, and I've always appreciated craftsmanship. And I was chatting to a buddy the other day over a cigar actually about that. And I think it's just, for me, I just focus on that, and it's so rewarding because I know someone's put all this time and energy into doing something for no reason other than they just really want to do something. And I think it speaks to entrepreneurial flair that there's always new watches coming out and people are trying different things and different materials. And it's almost the fact that it's so redundant in today's world makes it.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody needs a luxury watch. The fact that it's a luxury item tells you they don't need it, right? We all have phones, that's fine. We all have calendars that, like, just that second alerts me or you, whoever it was. And I think getting kind of really lost and squirreled into that world of luxury watches.
Craftsmanship, isn't it? Essentially, why are Swiss watches so renowned? It's the craftsmanship, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you look at the handiwork, the limited time. You showed me a nice. Is it a Daytona you've got?
No. This is a Milgauss. The basic story about the Milgauss. See, I can show that there.
Yeah, beautiful, man. I love the color. It's I love it. It's like a tinge, different angles change, like a bluey, green, turquoise tinge. I love it.
Yeah, the Milgauss has 4 features that make it special in the Rolex world. The first thing is his name. So Milgauss. Mil's French for 1,000. Gauss is German for magnetism, how you measure magnetism. So this was originally designed in 1960s for CERN, the laboratories in Switzerland and
the particle accelerators. Yes.
So designed for those scientists because the kryptonite of watches, mechanical watches, is magnetism. So this has what's called a Faraday cage, which is a case back and then a second case back. And that allows this watch to withstand a higher level of magnetism than otherwise would be possible. So it keeps the watch's time effectively much stronger than when it would be warped by magnetism. So that's one. Second thing is this green glass that only Rolex do. It's a green sapphire crystal, which is, I actually don't know how they do it, but it's super interesting. I should probably know that. And then the dial is what's called Z blue. So it's a specific blue that they've done just for the Milgauss range. And then the last thing, which is maybe the coolest thing, is the second hand is like a lightning bolt. Well, it is a lightning bolt.
Yes.
And again, that's a hawk back to the scientific kind of community.
Yes.
So
and not exactly, it's a craftsmanship, isn't it? Like you really appreciate the little intricate touches,
yes,
and you're wearing basically a factory on your wrist.
Yeah, something well thought through, and yeah, I mean, the fact that watches have become so mainstream, right? You go on Instagram, I mean, obviously mine's like that because that's all I look at, really. But you see everywhere. Rappers talk about Pateks like they're, you know, what they used to talk about cars, right?
Yeah.
Nobody talks about Patek Philippe. Patek Philippe was this kind of brand that only those who were really into wristwatches would know. It wasn't a big thing. Now everyone's heard of Patek Philippe. And that's it's become part of culture now.
Yeah.
I was talking to I find this interesting about you, but generation gaps have become much smaller. So the gaps become larger, but the age of a generation is the time span of a generation. That's what I'm trying to get to. It used to be 25 years, they would say, right?
Yeah, no, it's squeezed. Yeah, it's squeezed.
It's ridiculous.
5 years now, I would say. Like Gen Z, all this Gen
like
Y.
5 years now.
Yeah,
like 5 years. If you look at, I'm 30. If you look at a 25-year-old, then a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old, the things they use their technology for, how they use technology or how their brain functions, light years different. Whereas when I was growing up, like, which feels like a long bloody time ago, but like, you know, I still remember no mobile phones like this, polyphonic ringtones. That was
Snake.
If you had a ringtone with more than one type of tone, you made it. You're killing it.
Do you remember Bolt Blue or something? You could compose your ringtones. You remember that? You had to type in the keys, hash star star star, and you'd get a random Eminem tune as your ringtone.
I remember I was talking to a buddy about this. Like Crazy Frog was everything. Watching MTV, and it was just very different. But like now, I think, like, as I say, me being 30, being my brother's wife's sister, for example, who is low 20s, how, like, her use of TikTok, I know, don't get me wrong, people at 50, 80 use TikTok, don't get me wrong, but people are using technology and social media very differently within a 5-10 year age span. It just never used to be that way, I don't think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I'll give you an example. So I'm older than, I'm 35.
Okay.
So I was at college 2004, 5, 6. YouTube just came out. Facebook just came out. 2008, Twitter came out. And then in 2010, Instagram came out. All while I was at uni and college. Like, you know, towards the end of that as well. Wow. It wasn't during.
Wow.
You know, like, it wasn't at school. It wasn't at primary school, secondary school. I've got a 13-year-old brother, and he's going through it all now. You know, like generation differences. So I don't think I would have passed medical school if I had this around. I don't know about you, but
it's interesting because I have this app which sometimes I like, sometimes I think it's a bit annoying, which is called Headway. And not Headspace.
I know Headspace, the meditation app.
Yeah, not that. This is called Headway. This is like book summaries. So I think is it Summerly, or there's another one that's more
Blinkist. There's a Blinkist, isn't there?
I think that's the one that I actually want to switch to, because this one, it just feels a bit samey to me. And that was why I originally got it, because I was sick and tired of reading books that everyone reads, what I call groupthink, where everyone's just reading, like, giving a fuck. Everyone's reading this, and like they all think they're a genius because this guy told them one thing. It's like, you need to read a breadth of things. It's different. And that's why I got it. And anyway, the one I was reading today, I forget what it's been called, but it was talking about that, of like focus. And for me, like when I'm delving into try and figure out if a watch deal makes sense, or can I buy this, or does this sale make sense? Like there's nothing else that exists in the world to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think,
Hyper focus. And
yeah,
you have to have that to really separate yourself from the masses of people. And
Yeah.
you have to have that laser focus. And obsession almost, isn't it? Like you're a United fan.
Yes.
What separated Ronaldo from Nani and all these guys? He was just obsessed.
Absolutely. It's also interesting. So I think back to this kind of like enjoying the moment, enjoying the day, and kind of that. It's like now, right? I could easily have said to you, "Oh, listen, I've been out most of the day. I've got WhatsApp messages. That's how the watch business is basically done on WhatsApp. I've got those to follow up on, and I've got the CRM system that I've not looked at today, and this, and I used to be like that, right? It was like it was the high focus and obsession took over everything. So all of a sudden, but then you get to a point, and I think this is where I'm getting to regards to having ambition, but also
having it in a nice balance.
And my therapist will laugh because I hate the word balance. We'll come to that in a second. But yes, but is that like last night I could have come in and buddy of mine goes, "Oh, do you fancy going to Chinese with my girlfriend who's over from Barcelona?" Yeah, absolutely, let's do it. Because and I said this will be burning issues in a week or so. Talking about moments in life being like punctuation marks in your story, because otherwise you just get dragged away, and things just happen, and you're taking and backwards and forwards. And as I say, I could have spent this evening working, last evening working. One, you're going to burn out, right? We know that is going to happen. You might just get bored of what you're doing. And these things you're doing, like normally of most people, you're going to be doing these things from, let's be honest, like 25, if you go to university, give or take, to at least 65. So you have 40 years, right, to be doing something. Now you can change what you're doing, but you are going to be doing something for 40 years, and it's going to be most of your day.
Yeah.
Chances are you should probably pick something you want to do.
Exactly.
And not the thing that you think is going to pay the best given the certain parameters. Now, granted, you have to pay bills and whatnot, but I am certain, and probably you are too, that if you commit yourself to being the very best or that you can be in a given field that maybe doesn't pay all the best, you won't need all those distractions, all those luxury items to perk yourself up from the job you absolutely hate.
Yeah, exactly.
Year holiday from,
Yeah.
And
exactly. Because that job, it goes back to calling, and a lot of people don't understand the concept of calling and gifting, and what's your unfair advantage. And once you find that, it never feels like work. Job never feels like work. You're actually in the moment.
Never.
It goes into the state of flow almost.
It does. You get this kind of flow state. So here's a really important point. And by the way, you're gonna have to stop me when you need to stop, because I'm good for.
I'm loving this.
So I have had this thing, this problem, I would suggest, against the word balance. This war against the word balance, because I think it's just used so incorrectly. And I often look at definitions of words to think, is it just me and how I use the word, or is it the way the world's now using words, which often they're so far removed from the definition that actually the definition ends up like having to change because of how it's being used. So obviously the phrase that comes to mind when everyone says balance is work-life balance, right? It's what everybody thinks of. And here's my problem. It's the same as saying like a balanced diet, right? More in your world. And I'm sure you probably hear and see this a lot. I'm not quite sure what area I'm listening to now, but surely you'll come across this, where people are like, okay, using a very extrapolated and bonkers example, but I had a salad for lunch, therefore, it's not that bonkers, therefore I can have a KFC tonight. You know what I mean? Now, in theory, yeah, every so often you can do that. But if you're kidding yourself to say that you're saving the calories and that was a healthy meal, so that balances that, that's where I have the issue. Now bring that into the work-life situation, saying I did a 7-hour day in the office today, whatever that means for you, which then means I'm good to sit in front of the couch watching endless TikTok reels for 7 hours. That's a pretty balanced day. Well,
work seven. Exactly. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, just because I put 7 and 7, no, not really. So then I went to like blend, which I quite like. So I thought of it as like, you know, if you were the sort of person that makes juices every morning, you don't, maybe some people do, but I don't think you normally would do this. You wouldn't go, well, I put 3.5 oranges yesterday. Today and do the exact same thing. You might change it up and go, actually, I fancy something a bit more with apple in today, or honey, or so each day you're kind of blending it differently based on what.
So intuitive, almost intuitive.
Yes, so I quite like that.
Yeah.
And then more recently, which I think is the pinnacle of where I'm at with this, is harmony. Because if you look into what a harmony is and what like a harmony means musically, it's like the culmination of multiple things forming a song, for example. So like those isolated things, like the drums, the bass, the piano, the vocals, the lyrics, everything, in isolation, they're okay. But in harmony together, they make something way greater. Yeah, that's greater than some of the parts. And that, I think, is how you should live your life, in harmony. Because then you don't look at things based on, well, I saw my wife for 2 days, so now I'm off for a week, it doesn't matter. You see what I mean? You don't think of things in this kind of bizarre, like weighing it up all the time.
Exactly. Otherwise, it becomes transactional, and life is so far too unpredictable to become transactional. And what you said there, life is to be lived. Live in the moment. And if, you know, being so regimented is the definition of being in prison, by the way. That's the definition of being in prison, isn't it? Like, everything is literally
so interesting, man.
You know, so we are imprisoning ourselves by being so regimented. So I said to all my clients, whether it's mindset coaching or personal training, do it intuitively. Intuitive eating and intuitive working out. So if you're aching today, your legs are aching, then don't do legs day. Oh, but Wednesday is supposed to be legs day for me. No. Aching, don't do legs day. You know, and I think what the example you gave of the blender is great. Not only because smoothies are close to my heart, but it's true about blending. Literally, different blend how you feel. Like I make smoothies, you know, twice a day sometimes.
Yeah,
a bit more peanut butter to make it thicker, a bit more whey powder.
Right, but you're not weighing it out like a bodybuilder. You're just going like, oh, that's cool. Let's try that one, and then you try it. You're like, oh, wow. Next time we're doing that more, or this more, or absolutely.
I'm a big fan of eyeballing. You know, eyeballing, and you know, like when you go to the restaurant, you don't say, "Can you weigh the chicken and someone else so I can see?" And you know, intuitively, that's decent. I need probably a bit more veg. I might just get a bit more side as well, just to balance it out a bit. So intuitive, and that takes things away from decision making into what we call the basal ganglia, which is the kind of the subconscious part of the brain. It's like driving. Driving used to be mirror signal maneuver, but now it's autopilot. And the same with eating or working out for me now. I've done it for so many years. That's what I teach my clients. Don't concentrate on the doing. Concentrate on becoming that person. And James Clear talks about it in Atomic Habits. You know, like, you know, become the person.
Great book, by the way.
Oh, one of the best books of all time. I love that book.
Great book.
It came out just before COVID, I think. I don't know when it came out, but I read it in COVID 2020. Audio book. And it's true, like, you know, like I model myself trying to get to Ronaldo's physique. And I'm like, will Ronaldo have this KFC at 10 o'clock at night? Will Ronaldo have this milkshake at 2 p.m.? I give myself some leeway. But then if you model yourself on someone, you know, you've got a benchmark there. And that's important. You mentioned it right at the beginning. Mentorship. So you can have virtual mentors as well, someone you've not really met before, but you look up to them as if they are your mentors. And for me, physically, like Ronaldo's a great example. He's got kids as well, similar age, and I want to be that kind of physical specimen who essentially, you know, intuitively knows this is too much food, this is enough. Because he gave that example of Patrice Evra when they went to the restaurant in Manchester, and Ronaldo just ate rice and chicken. And you know, like it's about being that person as opposed to being so regimented in what the food is. It's actually adopting that mindset this person has, and asking yourself that question: will he do this? And if the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't do it.
Yep. And so that was also something that I think about a lot. And again, as watching, I find it really annoying that Joe Rogan's not on YouTube now properly. It's on Spotify.
Yeah, they're taking all the rights, haven't they?
Yeah, I just don't like use Spotify for podcasts, and I like to watch podcasts. I don't like to listen to them for some reason. And then, I just don't find the time, or that I don't prioritize, better word to put it, like watching it on Spotify or whatever. I'd rather watch like someone on YouTube. But yeah, he was in fact, no, it's not The Rock. I've got myself confused. I started reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's new book. And it's called Be Useful, right? And he talks about this, and I think this is way as well quite a lot, and you just mentioned it as well, which is like making things like really like simple. So for him, it was like, I want to be this bodybuilding champion, and that was his thing. And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, if that's what I'm trying to get to, like, would this thing I'm doing, this decision I have to make, is it getting me closer or further away from that thing?
Yes.
Like, is me going to grab this chocolate bar right now, is that going to get me to lose that 10 kilograms or not? Probably not. Okay, well, that's not, listen, you got to have, as you said, that leeway and what have you. Now, I don't know what you think about this. I did this burning issues of the week about goal setting, because I'm like the anti-goal setter. In fact, I think it was more than a few weeks ago, because I just think they're very dangerous. Now, you talked about like having someone to look up to, and if that works, then that's great. And if that is something, again, that helps you, like Arnold Schwarzenegger was saying, is like saying, is this getting me closer to that physique or not, type thing. And I get that. I just feel like with goal setting, it's another thing that's kind of, it's interesting, because I don't know whether it's because of age or it wasn't as big a thing. You're a touch older, so maybe you'll be able to shed some light on this a bit. But I don't remember growing up and all these self-help books being a big thing.
Yeah, they weren't. You're right, absolutely.
Well, there wasn't a social media.
Only Tony Robbins back in the 90s, that was it.
Yeah, I don't remember him being around. So I think also you're right, and I'm just thinking about it, that social media obviously has perpetuated this whole. Everybody can become a mentor if you got one follower, which is fine. I'm about that. I don't mind. If everyone's got interesting things to say, that's what my podcast's all about. I don't think it matters who you are and what you are. But all of a sudden now, the biggest thing is all about goal setting. Oh, you got to set goals, and this is I remember in business GCSE, right? They used to describe goals, and I actually again mentioned this today with my guy that I mentor, that they used to set goals, and the way you set goals is with SMART as the acronym.
Yes, specific, measurable,
achievable, realistic, time bound. Mr. Hodgson did a good job. I remember it, and he was a socialist who was a business studies teacher. That's a whole other conversation. A Che Guevara tattoo. We found this out way later. So that's right, what the goal setting was about. And then now there's this whole thing about, okay, I want to lose weight, so I want to lose 10 kilograms. And the trainer will say, okay, but in what time frame? And you're like, okay, let's say like 6 months. Okay, and how are you going to measure? Okay, weekly on the scale, blah, 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 blah. Fine. Now, for some people, that may work. But here's my counter that I think is correct for me, and I've seen it correct for other people. You set these goals, and you achieve that goal of losing the 10 kilograms in 6 months, for argument's sake. I'm telling you now, that high lasts a lot less than you think it will. And in fact, it's so insignificant, I would argue, for the amount of effort you put in, that you get pissed off. And then you go, oh, I've now, because it's what you're told, if you fed this, you've now got to set a loftier goal. You're doing all this stuff to get to this platform, to be discontent, to go to the next thing and be discontent. And you're constantly just in a state of discontent. And on top of that, when you don't achieve the goal, of course, we know that lasts forever. So hold on a minute. If we know this is the cycle that occurs, the goal setting cycle, let's call it, surely what's the benefit, right? What is the benefit here? So I believe that this goal setting cycle is incredibly dangerous and is actually probably one of the major things that's damaging our society. This goal setting cycle, right, is what I'd kind of describe it.
I completely agree with you. And I tweeted the other day, I said, the journey is the goal. Literally, I tweeted a few days ago, the journey is the goal. And I'll give you an example. I used to work in sports medicine. and we used to get terrible depression, athletes with depression who had actually won something. So they'd win, competition, Commonwealth Games, student games, whatever the case may be, British medal in diving, and they'd be depressed afterwards because they had achieved their goal. So you got a rock bottom moment, which you described for yourself, but you also got a rock top moment. Rock top moment is when you actually achieve what you wanted to. You've achieved the goal, but then you go into depression because you've got nothing else to look forward to, and it's the chasing the goal which gives you the dopamine. But once the goal has been achieved and chased, nothing left to chase anymore. What happens to the dopamine? It comes crashing down. That's why I agree with you. So we are constantly shifting the goalpost, and the yardsticks constantly keep moving. That's why to enjoy life fully, you have to be, the goal has to be the journey. There has to be no destination, because once you got a destination and a goalpost, you've reached it. You're quite right. And it happened to Tyson Fury. He went into depression when he became heavyweight world champion, because that was a goalpost. And you see in Olympic athletes, they are crying in the dressing room after winning a gold medal. Not crying from happiness, by the way. They're crying from sadness, because that's it now. 4 years of culmination of work is gone. As in, they've achieved what they wanted to, but that dopamine to look forward to get them out. And depression, addiction is so common in boxers, by the way. So, gambling, alcohol addiction, sex addiction even. It's such a big problem in athletes, because that, they've achieved their goal.
It's back to that self-destruct thing. It's like, what's above this? Nothing. So I may as well just go
self-soothing behavior. Then they go into self-soothing behavior with addictions and all kind of stuff, and it's very, very common. And there's a guy called Steve Peters. He's a Sheffield lad.
Okay.
He's written the Chimp Paradox.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He worked in Manchester a lot, actually. He worked with the Velodrome in Manchester. You've got.
Yep.
Yeah. He worked Chris Hoy and all this. So he worked a lot with the British cycling team about getting them out of this mindset. Actually, I'm speaking in a few weeks at a school with Claire from the Apprentice. She's finalist from 2003, was 4 or 5. Claire Young. Yeah. So she does school speakers. She's got agency of for speakers. So speaking in Leeds in a few weeks about psychology of sports, because we used to advise a lot of these young guys. Look, don't put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to sport and success, because you're gonna. If your life, it's only a game at the end of the day. It's literally only a game. If your whole life purpose is tied up into sport, you're gonna get as soon as the game's over, as soon as retired, or even worse, you get an injury and your career's prematurely cut short, you're gonna go into deep catatonia, like you said. It's gonna be such a severe bout of depression, it could end up in hospital. And it happened to what's his name, Clark, the footballer, tried to kill himself. Tyson Fury.
Oh, yes.
Clark Carlisle.
Yeah.
He talks about it as well, and I think it's very important to talk about this. It's November, mental health month, and it's really under discussed. It's the biggest killer of men under 40. It's something which is 2.5 times more likely in men. So, suicidal depression, suicide itself, it's 2.5 times more likely in men.
Is there any real reason for that, or is it to do with the fact that men just don't talk and share as openly as women do? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it does. Yes, exactly. Men don't talk, firstly, and secondly, men are executors. Men love planning and doing things. Whereas and the whole thing is action, isn't it? The whole topping yourself is an action. Suicide is it's something which has an end. It's a completed action.
Okay.
So, I see a lot of young 16, 17-year-old girls coming to A&E, paracetamol overdose. It never was intentional. Self-harm even, cutting the wrist. My man wouldn't cut his wrist. A man would go jump in front of a train. Bang, it's just a very clinical way to end life, because they don't see anything beyond that. And I think it's very important we talk about this. And I'll try and get the podcast out as soon as we can, because it's November and not enough conversations are happening regarding.
It's true. It's very true. And as I say, I do go back to the mental health thing. I do have this kind of concern with where the conversation's gone with mental health, that people that are actually long-term sufferers of mental health conditions are being put into the same basket as people that are just going through life events.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving house is a very stressful thing. It always has been, always will be. It's changed, it's difficult. That doesn't mean you need to go to the doctor and get medicated. And I think almost partners are pushing other partners, I've seen this, to go and see somebody because they're seeing all this stuff on social media who are not qualified to give this advice.
Yeah.
And yet, for some reason, we seem to believe that anyone can talk about mental health that has had no experience. Well, you wouldn't just listen to somebody on YouTube or on social media, more likely talking about how to beat cancer. You know what I mean, or whatever it is that you guys do day to day, or how to perform heart surgery. Like, you wouldn't, because a specialist does that. For some reason, we think that everyone with a brain can talk about mental health and can advise and tell you, and it's like, if you're really careful as to who you're talking to. I mean, even within the mental health world, I think it's really terrible that psychiatrists aren't specialized normally. You know, it's not like, I say this again, I said this to people, why on earth I wouldn't go to a GP to perform heart surgery? So why am I going to a general psychiatrist to tell me about bipolar when you just have a general understanding 30 years ago?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I agree with you. And that's something I've talked about quite a lot, actually, especially psychiatry, because more psychiatrists are trained in two things: core psychiatry and general adult psychiatry. You know, a lot of them, because what you're talking about there, bipolar, is an affective disorder. So affective disorders are to do with the mood. So you've got affective disorders, which need, then, you know, you've got various therapies. But then you've got the personality disorders, you've got the psychotic disorders, you've got so many disorders. And specialization at the moment, because of the way the NHS is, they're much better in America, by the way. They specialize very early, specialize at 29, 30, they specialize. Here, you can still be in your 30s and still be training very broadly, because it's service provision because of the population that we have here.
Right.
Yeah. But Charles, this was a lovely conversation. I'd love to pick up again, part 2 and part 3, hopefully.
Definitely.
In person one time.
Definitely.
How can people find you online?
So, I mean, pretty simple. You type my name in, and I think it's Charles Oliver Burns, at Charles Oliver Burns on Instagram, or at Watch Marketplace is the business handle. And I think just back to, hopefully you do get to releases in November. I'm
trying to do it as soon as possible. I've got backlog. I think I'm going to prioritize this one. It's very important to talk about it, especially with your experience on reality TV and all that stuff. Yeah,
I just think, and it's a simple message, and people say this all the time, but they don't do it enough. Just pick up the phone to your mate. Not even a mate that's struggling, just your buddy. Just see how they're doing. You might not have spoken for 2 months. Just say, hey, how's work going? Those things, it sometimes can be that little bit of release of pressure and stress that you don't even realize what you did. And all you did was you just picked up the phone. So it's not even, I'm going to do it from the other way around, because normally people are like, oh, call someone when you're in need. Do the other thing. When you're in a good spot, or whatever spot you're in, you preempt and call someone, not because you think there's something wrong with that person, but it's nice to hear from someone that you know. So that's all I'm going to say. Just pick up the phone, 5-10 minute conversation. Not difficult. We can all find it, because you don't expect to be on TikTok for 5-10 minutes. Cut that time down, call someone. Surely that's going to help, over a long period of time. And you'll be surprised how far that can go. I think that's a very, very powerful last message. Just pick up the phone. You're right. Absolutely. Just check up on your buddy, ask if they're okay. And we had a service. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I think you don't wait for that person to call you when there's a problem. Just constant communication every so often. We've got modern technology. Don't know where you are in the world. FaceTime somebody out the blue. As I say, back to this conversation, my buddy calling me and just saying, hey, I'm really proud of you, has a profound impact on you. It was a 2-minute conversation. He said a couple of words. It doesn't take much. It costs nothing. Do it. 100%. And you could save a life. You literally could save a life. Yeah. And you know this better than anyone, and especially with your mentoring as well. Just a few kind words, especially for men. Men don't, often they say the only time men get flowers are at their funeral. Yeah. And that's a sad reality for a lot of men. And, I'm going to get this podcast out in the next few days. Awesome. And it's Charles, keep doing the work you're doing. It'd be good to meet you in person when I'm in Manchester, Christmas markets, perhaps. Whenever you want. For Chinese, you like your food. You like your Chinese food, so we'll go for some. Who would have guessed?
I can tell. I can probably guess by your WhatsApp status.
Yeah.
But no, brilliant, Charles. Thank you so much. Pleasure
Thanks for
having
your
you on. And it's been a long time overdue, so it was well worth the wait. And thank you so much, buddy.
Appreciate
I'm going to start the recording now.